Let's start our conversation for this hour, though, and this is on professionalism. There have been conversations on social media for a while. Now, let's just peg this one on. A tweet by the Principal Secretary for Interior, Dr. Raymond Omolo, who was showing the progress of the Ngong Suswa Road. After very many years, this road is completed. And they had some aerial shots of the road. And people came back and said, boss, this road, no markings, none. This road, no lighting, none. This road, no signage appears to have been erected on this road. In fact, people went into the road and started taking videos and clips of and photos of the road and saying, no signage at all, no markings at all, and so on and so forth. Much as then we take the issue onto the politicians and the political leadership of the country, which we must, let's also turn the eye to the other side, which is the professional side. And we have the president of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya, Engineer Shammah Kiteme, in the studio with us. Good morning, Engineer.
Good morning, Eric.
Karibu sana, and thank you for joining us back in this here, Fixing the Nation.
Asante sana.
Meet Felaris, she's the new fixer.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Karibu, as she gives you the day's course.
Asante sana.
Karibu sana, Engineer. A lot of welcomes this week. And to welcome you and to start the conversation, we have our quote of the day, which is, every generation inherits a world it did not make. And each generation is responsible for the world it will leave behind. And this is a quote by Robert F. Kennedy, who was an American lawyer and politician. Your thoughts on that?
What a powerful statement this morning. For me, it's like I've been contemplating that all through in the car. I just found myself in a position where those who went ahead of us put in structures and systems and processes that have heavily impacted my generation. And we've been caught up in trying to see what we can make good out of that. And the temptation is always to blame those who went ahead of you.
Correct.
But then you realize you still have something that you must do to bequeath posterity something better. And so that for me is quite powerful statement.
I like that, we've looked at it plain and simple, is that we each have to play our part. And given that we're here now talking to the professionals, we've been looking at the politicians and the politicking around infrastructure, pointing fingers and saying, this one is not doing this body is not doing this, but we need to now look at the institutions that have a part to play in this. Do you, in your capacity, say, or would you stand and say proudly that the engineers of this country are actually doing us good in terms of protecting us and also building things that this generation can be happy about, and the generation that's coming can look back and say, you know what, those people were given the mandate and they've done their job?
Well, quite profound, to be fair, Felaris. And the fact that from where I sit, and a practitioner, I do know that indeed we have a rotten underbelly in very many ways. There are multiplicity of factors that cause some of these issues. But I know clearly there are people who don't live up to the standards. We have a code of conduct for professional ethics. We do have the standards that we should comply with. But we are a society that has, veered towards relativism, and where truth and facts become a moving target. And while what we do as engineers is empirical, we work with facts and figures and science. Sometimes you have factors like finance, for example. It comes into play. You need to do a project. Do you have sufficient financing to do that project? That's a question. Sometimes you know what you need to undertake, but then the administrative and other constraints that you have to work with. And therefore, I do know very well from where I sit, because I've sat both in the Institution of Engineers of Kenya, but also in the board, where I've sat in disciplinary committee meetings on issues affecting our profession. But the bottom line is that we have a rotten underbelly and a lot of issues that we have to address.
Okay. Let me ask a direct question on, let's go into construction of a road. Okay. Just walk us through the steps. of, so there's a road that is earmarked for upgrading to, we call it bitumen standards,
Right.
tarmacking of a road, okay? Walk us through the steps. Who plays what role at what stage?
You want to look at it both if it's a private project or it's a public project. But because we are all affected by public projects, let's work with public project. Number one, there is a need to know the project needs to be done. And therefore, following the requirements of Public Finance Management Act, you need to have the feasibility done. You need to have the finances set aside for the project. There are several stages that you go to make the project qualify even for the financing and all that. But to cut the story short is that before you even embark on the project, there must be funds set aside for that project. Now, if their funds are not set aside for that project, that becomes the start of the project. You have the intention to do the project, then the finances have not been allocated. So probably there's political pressure to you for you to start the project, and you don't have the finances. You'll start the project. However, that project will stall somewhere because there are no finances. Stalling means you're going to have sunk costs, so that what you had done, the time it will take when it is not complete and it's in use, it's deteriorating. So the thing is, if there are no finances and you have started the project, you're setting yourself for failure. Even when you had set the budget for that project and you have an intervening period when the project is not complete, there's going to be deterioration. There's also going to be escalation of costs, stuff like that. You're even going to have a contractor who is on site. And because the equipment and plant are idle, they will start charging you interest and stuff like that. So it becomes a mess. By the time that project is over, you have doubled, the price has escalated and stuff like that. You are not likely going to get the quality, because at some point, pressure is going to build up for you to finish the project. So most likely, you're likely to compromise on quality. So yes, there are various stages. So you need the financing aspect to be cleared. You need to work on the procurement aspect. Then you have the technical aspects too. The technical aspect is straightforward. It's a rule of the thumb. It is standards. It is empirical. You go, do the topographical studies. You set out the route. You design, and there are various aspects of design. Not just pavement. There are materials. There are drainage. There are structures. So you would consider all these factors. But let me tell you, to be fair, design is the simplest because you just use standards. The other factors of the project, including stakeholders, including finance, including procurement, and political considerations, now come into play, and what should be a very straightforward project becomes complicated. Maybe the route that you're supposed to follow, people have to be relocated. That's a consideration. People have to be compensated. Value has to be, the land to be compensated has to be valued and stuff like that. Procurement process, intervening factors. People have preferred contractors. They may not be as qualified and stuff like that. We've talked about finance. We know they are limited. So we may get finance allocation for this financial year. And then, while the project is 1 billion, what Treasury is giving you is 100 million. What does that mean? It means you can only do 100 million worth of the project. So what do you do with that? And then 5 years down the line is when you're going to get 300 million in addition to the 100 million, something like that. So then it creates a mess of a situation, so that what should be a straightforward issue, it becomes complicated.
Okay, let's use a practical example. Ngong Suswa Road, all right? So this project was started in, I think, Uhuruto 1. Okay? Before that, and let's look at the role of engineers specifically in the entire project. The road sector in Kenya has the Kenya Roads Board, and then it has the 3 agencies. Kenya National Highways Authority, Kenya Urban Roads Authority, Kenya Rural Roads Authority. Ngong Suswa is under KERA, isn't it? It's Kenya Rural Roads Authority. So the section between Ngong to Suswa, by the time we are coming to say we want to upgrade it, what is the role of the engineer throughout this project?
Well, of course, the engineer will be the person to do route selection. They will be able to collect all the data that is required in terms of materials and stuff. There will be surveying done, and there will be the design that will be done. Now, that is a point of the design and planning. During the implementation, the engineer will be there as a resident engineer for supervision purposes, so that the contractor who is doing the project, he will be supervised to make sure that they follow the steps they're supposed to follow, and we get a quality project. Of course, once the construction is over, we also have defects liability period, within which now you observe if there are defects to make sure they are corrected and stuff like that. Beyond that, there is also the maintenance, because whenever we have an asset, the asset during its lifetime, it requires to be maintained appropriately. So there are all those stages that the engineer would be involved in, but yes, they would be involved from
design,
from start up to the end,
all the way to the end,
and during the life of that asset.
And design, you said these are technical, these are basics.
Yes.
And you said, this is why you look at the topography, and then you design the road furniture.
Yes,
what are the basic minimums for a road?
I think,
like the Ngong Suswa road.
To be fair, you expect the driveway, which is the pavement, which we see the black part, and we want to drive there. And of course, it's very important to have the drainage. We also have, we also need to have a way to have those people who are not driving, for example, walkways, paths for that, they need to be provided. But we also have the road furniture. We know we need signage, we need markings and stuff like that. But at basic, a road must have the driveway, it must have the drainage, it must also provide the means for those who are not driving, how they are going to be use the facility. Because not every road user is a driver. We have people cycling and you have people walking. And of course, you categorize the roads. There are those that are urban and others. You also mentioned about the agencies. You left others. KWS is also you allocated some finances by KRB, in addition to the other three agencies that you talked about. Yeah.
Just looking at the accountability structures that fall within the mandate that is IEK and the engineers themselves. So we saw government as of December 2025 cleared around 123 billion just to make sure that all the stalled projects that were coming up to close to 1,000, there were around 875 stalled projects, for them to resume. Now, like you earlier said, these roads have been in use, they're deteriorating, but money has been released. So what role is IEK and its engineers playing in terms of, one, accountability, that this money is not just being released to complete roads for the sake of completing them, but actually ensuring quality standards are met, and we are not then flagging off roads that, are substandard and saying that they are complete just for the sake of being complete, because you still have a mandate that, can this road be used for X amount of time? Does it justify the cost that we are seeing? Because you've flagged financing as one of the issues. So what's the responsibility that IEK is carrying within its mandate, within itself, to play a role of accountability?
Yeah, the proper role of IEK has been advocacy, because we are welfare and a member society, and we have been very vocal, and I thank this platform. It has given us that avenue. And the other thing we do is we do continuous professional development of members to continually update them on the standards and what they're supposed to do in terms of professional code of ethics and professionalism. So we have continuously done that, and once in a while we get informed when a member is veered off, and so we have been consistent. But to say our members take ultimate professional responsibility, no way we can run away from that. If I'm the engineer, I am technically responsible in all ways to advise the decision makers. And I take professional responsibility, because that's why projects get registered with someone's license. And therefore, I'm not saying here that our members can be, let go free. of some of these situations. And we've seen painful situations. For example, we had a number of accidents along the Ngong Road past Junction, you know, and we debated and debated and debated, and we said there is a clear design failure. Until those design failures were corrected, we have talked within ourselves and said, why would you design an asset to be a killing avenue? It is not right. And while we see buildings collapse, which is catastrophic, and you want to run the next moment and get the engineer responsible, sometimes our colleagues in the road sector, we may not easily trace them and get them and all that. It's a conversation we're having. Road safety is a very important aspect. No, they are members, of course, and it's a conversation that we have continued to have and stuff like that. So I'm saying road safety is a very big conversation, and as an institution, we have taken a position. We released media releases on road safety, and we have even picked roads which we can see there are clear problems, and we have highlighted them, and we have given our recommendations. But the bottom line is that our professionals, our members cannot run away when they are responsible for a project and it becomes a nightmare to citizens.
You know, what's crazy is just from some of the images that we had, and Phil, maybe you could put up a few, even without being an engineer or any engineering, but you can just see that something is wrong. By the time, like, what does it take for you guys to come in? You know,
because you're using the same roads every day.
Yeah, we're using the same roads. As a civilian, I can just look at, for example, there's one lane being eaten by the pillar that's supporting a bridge. So it's 4 lanes into 3 lanes with no marking, no nothing. It's Ngong Suswa, and it's the same even from I forget the name of the road, but it essentially connects like Rongai to Ngong Road. And it's the same, it's just road, not a marking, not a light, not a bump, just tarmac. And it just goes on and on. So if I can see that, you have seen that, your colleagues have seen that, what's happening?
Yeah, well, we really have to call out our professional colleagues. There is no shortcut.
Who is we, engineer? Who is
and
we?
also, even as he's answering that question, I'm very curious about any license that would be withdrawn. You know, like how lawyers are disbarred, and you're told now you cannot represent any client in court matters or law matters. Has there anything that IEK has done? You've gone assessed a project and seen anyway you are not even doing best practice in whatever way, and we are withdrawing your license and saying you will never touch another engineering project.
Yes, our members have been involved in these processes because while we are a society working for the welfare and advocating for engineers and involved in continuous professional development, we have the regulator, who is the Engineers Board of Kenya. And I've sat in disciplinary meetings where we have asked members questions about their professionalism and stuff like that. And when members have been found culpable, their licenses have been withdrawn. Members, they have been suspended. So this is not something that has not happened. It has happened, and there are members in the list who cannot practice because their licenses have been withdrawn because of the degree of their professional culpability in events that are, untoward in terms of professionalism. And what we do affects public safety. So it's very critical we maintain a degree of discipline, and so it's not only advocates who have been disbarred and all that. The same has happened to engineers.
How many? Sorry,
I do not have a number of head now, but that has happened, and there are even continuing cases as we speak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's take a break at 27 after 8. We are hosting engineer Shammah Kiteme. He's the president of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya. This is, the welfare club of engineers. We know there is the regulator side, which is the Engineers Board. There's a reason why we invited the Institution of Engineers, because this is a collective of engineers. If engineers collectively do not have a social conscience on the lack of professionalism among them, it doesn't matter who the regulator is, because the head of the regulator will always be an engineer, right? So it doesn't really matter. And so we have got to start from here. We're asking, where is the professionalism for engineers in this country when you have roads poorly constructed, buildings collapsing? If you've got any example you can give, please post it on our social media platforms. We'll be back shortly. Fixers online with their comments. Educatel says, when you take a project, you need to be professional. We don't need Chinese to come and build our roads while we have engineers who qualify for the job. And I think this comes also into Eugene Larry Ososo's comment, who says, why is the government mostly in the business of having foreigners building our infrastructure? Do we lack competitive personnel who can undertake these projects? Am I a clause when receiving funding? And how are you addressing this matter as the IEK? It's Jabali. Is there a minimum quality measure recommended for a road? Some turn into swimming pools soon after short rains. Still, Mike the One, safety issues, some high-profile projects such as the Outer Ring Road in Nairobi, we've been criticized for dangerous design elements that do not prioritize user safety despite being designed. Can respond to some of them.
Yeah. You know, Kenyans are very intelligent and very educated. So, and the problem with engineering, I don't know whether there's a problem to say what. We say the doctor will bury his mistakes when the patient dies, but the engineer will live with his mistakes. They will be seen not by himself, but so many others. That is not to say sometimes there are no restrictions. The bottom line is that as responsible professionals, we cannot run away from this, because otherwise we lose the trust of the public. I have berated the authorities about trusting foreigners and all that. Let me tell you, the other day I was in numerical machining complex, and I sat into the car that was manufactured in this country, 100%, Nyaya Pioneer car. This industrial complex here, numerical machining complex, it can manufacture hospital beds, it can manufacture machines, engines and stuff like that. This country can become an industrial powerhouse if we needed to do this and create employment opportunities to Kenyans, engineers, technicians, technologies, and supporting stuff. It's a question of policies and all that. So I better run away, avoid that conversation of foreigners, because I talk about it very passionately. But let me say this. We must have facts in our fingers that we can do things right. When I have seen, like, this country has undergone general social collapse of social fabric, because truth is relative. Anything can be negotiated. We want to negotiate even facts and figures, but you cannot negotiate safety. You must get a safe road to drive on, signages, walking lanes, the driveway, and someone should be able to, the other day I was driving along, I don't remember, it's Mombasa Road or where. Mombasa Road actually, somewhere around GM. And there is an overpass. And I'm fighting with Kenyans crossing the road. And this is a very busy part of the road. So somehow, there is also a culture among us Kenyans. We do not want to walk, do what will make us safe. We also want to risk. Unaona tu msana during the day. Msana kimbilia tu kwa barabara na cross over the person. There is a
there's a footbridge.
Yeah.
A bridge to pass over there. Why must you be there? And then I'm, driving. And I tell them, guys, kwa nini usipite juu? You understand? So even as we blame also the engineers and all that, I think there's a general collapse of values in our society. The social fabric is broken. Anyone can do anything. They can say anything and stuff like that. But we cannot, as engineers, fail to do what we should do as professionals, because then we lose the trust of the public, and that is catastrophic.
Yeah. One part that citizens have to play when it comes to collective responsibility. Early in the year, the institution you represent read from a report, which we were just talking about off air, that 85% of the buildings in Kenya are unsafe. And we keep hearing all of these statements, all of these reports. allow me just to ask, what do we do with this information as Kenyans? Now that we know, what do we tufanye? Because the professionals who could actually do something and push for either these buildings to be brought down, just ensuring the safety of Kenyans, are barely doing anything. So the information has come to the public. 85% of us are living in unsafe buildings. What are we supposed to do with this information?
Ideally, this information comes up, I'm sure, in these conversations, because the first question we ask normally is, what have you done? Then we tell you, we have taken time, and the responsible bodies, and this information, we were quoting the National Building Inspectorate. And this is not hearsay. There's a published report that when His Excellency the President, after the collapse of Ruma Building, there was an executive order that established and gave a mandate for National Building Inspectorate to carry out inspection of all buildings. And that report, in the report they provided, they looked at about 1,495 buildings, which revealed 723 were very dangerous, 10,791 were unsafe. It also recorded that 1,217 were fair, and about 2,194 are safe.
But this is just in Nairobi.
Well, it was the report generally covering various jurisdictions.
A sample.
Yeah. But at a sample, that's the best word to use.
Okay.
So the information comes up when you ask us what have we done. So yes, this are studies that have been done. And then there are recommendations. And some of the recommendations is what is dangerous, evacuate immediately, and make sure it is brought down. That has been done. What is fair, that building can be salvaged through retrofitting. And there is technical know-how how you can retrofit a building that would have otherwise collapsed if you let it without a retrofitting and repairing and stuff like that. But
So
what
as long as a foundation, basically.
not just adding foundation, there are various elements that support a building. The foundation is one of them. Then there are columns, then there are beams, then there are slabs, there are staircases and stuff like that, cladding and stuff like that. So that if the problem is a beam that is showing stress, like cracks and all that, you can reinforce that beam. If there is a column that you think did not meet the size that needs, that is required for the weight it is carrying, for the load it is carrying and stuff like that, you can jack it and stuff like that. And you can go all the way to the foundations and just make sure the building is safer if there are questionable issues. So the authorities, and especially National Building Inspectorate, has been proactive in saying you must evacuate and evacuate immediately. And you have seen buildings, they have ordered evacuation, and the next moment it has collapsed, saving lives, stuff like that. So, but what we're saying is we also need to be more intentional. We need to be more proactive. And this falls squarely on the regulators so that there is more proactive approach than reactive approach. Let us not sit and collapse has happened and we now go to investigate and stuff like that. Let us be more proactive. And here I blame the regulators. They are the regulators who should follow construction materials. Make sure the cement meets quality, steel meets quality, and other construction materials meets quality. There are authorities that also, regulators that should follow during the construction stage to make sure that the right steps are followed. And whoever veers off, they are held accountable. Let me say that there are thousands and thousands of buildings that go on in this building. A whooping, many of them do not collapse. But the one or two which collapse, they give us a very bad image as an industry. And we must have this conscience of saying we must save ourselves from this shame as a country because it is possible. You know, buildings collapse because of structural reasons. It is not because of architectural or whatever reason. And if any developer engages structural engineers properly and they are retained during the life of the project, chances of a collapse where you involve qualified, experienced, professional structural engineer, there are very few. Now, those that collapse, of course, when the professional engineer is responsible for the works, that's where now the disciplinary stages are taken. You understand? So we must save ourselves from this shame of buildings collapsing, and it is possible.
It sounds easier than it sounds probably easier said than done. I want to go back just to the collapsed buildings. Of the ones that are dangerous, what is the number one cause? What shortcut was taken 90% of the time, or 80%, or is it a combination of shortcuts?
There are a combination of factors which compromise building safety. I can mention many, but those ones that have been established through studies include poor workmanship. And that means you don't do what is supposed to be done in terms of mixing materials and all that, curing and stuff like that. There's also substandard materials, so that cement is compromised, steel is compromised, and even sand. Kuna ile sand mbaya, there is aggregates which are reactive. They are going to compromise the quality of cement itself, stuff like that. And of course, structural design is a big contributor. Basically, for this chair to carry me, simple statics, physics, it must generate equal, directly opposite the weight I'm exerting on the chair. The moment that is compromised, the chair will wobble and collapse, and I will fall down. The same case with the building. It's just the building is slightly bigger. If the building is not designed to carry the load or the weight that is supposed to carry, it will collapse. And there are other issues like inadequate maintenance. Those other contributors, and of course non-compliance to the requirements. For example, you build a building next to the river. What you are subjecting that building is to be compromised by the water in the river and stuff like that. There are sometimes the foundation is going to be weakened by the water and erosion and stuff like that. So, and then when the building is weak, now it is subject to other factors, unequal settlement, and then all those things. So you just need to make sure that you do it right and don't regret.
So aside from the Engineers Institute and the engineering board, the other people I should be going after is KEBS.
KEBS in terms of qualities, we have evidence of substandard cement. We have evidence of substandard steel. We have evidence of construction materials that do not meet the standard.
And on a site, who do I talk to or who is in charge of essentially quality control? Who is there to tell this cement is substandard? Is it the quantity surveyor? Is it the engineer? Is it the contractor? That to tell this steel cannot hold. This cement will not hold. It's not, or we haven't cured it long enough.
The engineer is supposed to be responsible to make sure the steel is tested and it passes. To make sure when you do mix of the materials, for example, sand, ballast, and cement, you do the certain tests. Slum test, for example. Slum test is for fresh concrete. There are minimum standards that you should meet. Then the other test, after now the cement has been cast, you get cylinder that you go and crush and establish whether it is meeting the design strength that it was supposed to be put up. So the structural engineer is squarely responsible. And this should be done on site and a record put to show steel was tested, it passed. Cement is passing. Aggregates, sand, they are passing. But also, when cast, there is evidence that we crushed the cube or the cylinder after 20 days, and it passes the strength that was designed to be for that test structure.
So bado tu nimejipata kwa engineer.
Bado uko pale pale.
Yeah, just roundabout, but all the way
Still
right back.
You end up back there. Engineer, I don't want to mince my words on this. Let me just put it this way, right? When professionals decide that they are not going to be professional, everything collapses. So we'll always be told, this developer, you started building a house and then you cut corners because you thought that professionals were expensive. And then you went and got somebody else.
Got a quack.
Why am I going to get quacks in an industry that has professionals who are operating. It's because professionals have basically graded the space.
Correct.
I cannot tell who is a professional and who's not. I'm just looking at who's cheaper and who's not. Because the professional and this other guy, to me, they are the same. When we see a building collapsing and then we talk about all these other things that could have happened, I go back into, you are the one who knows what cement should look like. I have absolutely no idea. I'll go to a shop and say, Niuzie simiti. You do not go to a shop and say Niuzie simiti as an engineer. You know what you should be looking out for. I'll go and say Niuzie chuma. You don't do that. In fact, you'll tell me where end of letter chuma, whatever. I'm the one who's going to buy what you sent me. But if the professionals cut corners, then everything else cuts corners. Let's just go into, for example, an engineer. How many years is it to graduate as an engineer in Kenya?
You have to take 5 years.
5 years as an engineer.
Then you have to do what you call initial professional development of minimum 3 years statutory requirements.
All right.
Then you have to sit for professional examination and pass for you to get licensed. And then now when you get licensed, then now you're expected to take professional responsibility.
Okay. That's 8 years
Close to a
of
decade.
training, learning, and working. 3 years working. That's a lot. That means that by the time somebody actually has that certification that I am a professional engineer, they have worked for long.
Correct.
By the time they become a consulting engineer, how many years later is that?
At
longer.
least 5 in addition to the 3.
There you go.
Okay.
So this is about 13 years for somebody to be that consulting engineer.
Right.
We have several in this country. Do you hear them talking about the delay and, I mean, not the delay, but the degradation of their profession? We don't hear them speaking.
Nope.
The professional engineers with 8 years walking around with certificate in their pocket and saying Chinese are taking our jobs and all, we don't hear them speaking about the quality
Correct.
of work that's being done. If engineers do not speak out for their own profession, then it becomes a quack industry, and that's why it'll be everything. We don't have quacks working for Kenya National Highways Authority. But we see the quality of roads. Kenha is building, Kura is building, Kera is building. We see the quality of buildings, big buildings, multi-story buildings that are being condemned and coming down. And engineers were involved at some stage, but they let it happen. What do we need to do to stop this?
So we must have professionals take responsibility. There's no shortcut. And I know this all too well. I practice. And I have had a client come and tell me, oh, please, can I do this on this? Can I add one more floor? And I am categorical. You cannot do that. And if I say that, the client listens. It is for us as engineers to set minimum standards and say, this is what can be done. When you do this, you cross the line. And let me tell you, I have abandoned projects myself when the client seemed to push me to what I felt I was not safe to do. I have abandoned the project. If I abandon the project and another one abandons it and another one abandons, the client will be forced to follow the professional way, the right way of doing it. So I am not I'm not here to absolve us as professionals. And I know there are very many honest and genuine professionals, but there are still the bad apples that things go wrong and we get where we are. And so anything that will be done and whoever will do anything to make sure that where a professional is involved, they are not cutting corners, then we'll start saving our country. I often quote this. The Code of Hammurabi, a very long law.
Yes.
A very, old law.
Yeah.
One of the requirement was that if you construct a building and that building collapses and it kills someone, the one who did that construction must be killed. That was a punishment. I've quoted that in my writing. Therefore, the society must come to that point and we stop negotiating everything and anything. Truth is not relative. Facts are stubborn.
Yeah.
We can negotiate some things, but we cannot negotiate that this building can only go to 10 floors.
Yeah.
We cannot start arguing.
Yeah.
Please make it 11, please make it 12. It doesn't work.
Right.
Science does not lie. Therefore, we must stop doing that. And we must hold professionals responsible individually. There's no corporate responsibility when it comes to what you are supposed to discharge as a professional. And so I'm not here to absolve anyone.
Yes.
I'm here to say, if we have to fix this, let's start picking people. Let's pick people. Let's hold someone responsible. Let's hold someone responsible. And then before long, people will know there's a red line you cannot cross.
You know, sorry, Mario. Engineer, you sound very good. You're speaking very well, and I believe you. Unfortunately, you're passing on this job to somebody else. Engineers have entrusted you with the role of leading their association. You're the president of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya. Today's quote talks about what you inherit and what you shall pass on.
Yeah.
What shall you pass on to the next president of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya if you will only just be talking and writing in IEK magazines about this?
That's a hard one. Well, my handover notes are ready. I said that a long time ago. But I hear you. I hear the pain in the society. They feel let down. We have done what we can do in terms of holding responsible those who have done wrong. Has enforcement been effective? No. We have been able to call out our colleagues when necessary. Should we enhance enforcement, regulatory effectiveness? Yes. I have been very categorical saying our regulatory effectiveness is under 20%. And we must find a way of enforcing that. We are debating how to do that. There is self-regulation conversation because we're seeing government has failed to regulate, and we are seeing the architects and the quantity surveyors have gone that route. That's a conversation that is ongoing. But
you shouldn't even wait for government to fail.
Yeah.
It should be self-regulation, and then government just comes kuangalia.
to
Meosha leo.
complement,
Yeah.
So, although you have passed a very harsh judgment on me that I have failed when they have elected, sometimes you come into the picture, you do the best you can do, and then you let others do. Let me say, and this is almost emotional for me, we have a system where as much as you want to do what is right, there are those who have designed a structural system that oppresses, that gatekeeps, that does not allow what is right to be done. And it is brutal. It is ruthless. I have fought that almost at a cost to my life. And it is sad. It is sad. There are people who have put in structures that are oppressive, restrictive, and all that. And the moment you start moving the direction of what is right, you do it at a high cost. Exactly. So we are not free from this kind of an environment, but we do what we can do. And as I sit at the end of my term, I've done everything I can do. I have walked to the streets to fight for the welfare of engineers. And we have done what we think is justice to engineers, the society. But we still have structural systems designed to oppress, to repress, and to limit, and to make sure that we remain a small cartel that does not allow what is good to be done.
Okay. Let me just finish with one comment, which I think speaks to something I wanted. We'll be out of time, though. The biggest problem, from Francis Odhiambo, the biggest problem is engineers take a lot of works and fail to supervise. How does an engineer take a job that they're not even able to visit a site and assess? And we've talked about this with architects as well. It's a few doing the job of many. which is essentially there's engineers who are senior engineers, consultant engineers, and they are able to take on multiple projects at a time, even when they don't have the capacity to. So it's rubber stamping this and that. But there's a site that says engineer Felaris Wamboi, Felaris at Adri, atu Albargon wapi, iko wapi. I'm sure that's another thing, but we'll talk about this hopefully when we do a Micro Ground, another one, and follow up on this conversation. But thank you so much, engineer. It's been great having you.
Always grateful to have these conversations.
Tuendelee sasa na conversation. In the next hour, Felaris anatumiss na nini atatuambia. And of course, we'll also keep you updated with what's happening on the ground. Ni kama leo kuna nuka maandamano hivi. It's kind of in the air. Let's see what's happening on ground.